Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the aromatic heart of the Mughal Empire, not for a battle or a coronation, but for something far more delicious. You, yes, you, are about to become an invisible guest in the royal kitchens of one of history's most extravagant dynasties. The time? Just before sunrise. The place? The marble-lined halls of Agra Fort. The mood? Well, let's just say your modern cereal game is not ready for this. Imagine it, the hush before dawn, when the city's chaos hasn't yet begun. Inside the kitchens, it's already warm. Wood crackles in vast clay ovens. Dozens of barefoot cooks shuffle silently, some half asleep, some focused, all under pressure. Huge cauldrons are stirred with ladles the size of oars, and hanging in the air, curling around your nose, is a scent: saffron, rose, and just a hint of garlic. You probably won't survive this level of breakfast luxury. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere distant or unexpected, let me know your location and the local time down in the comments. I love seeing where you all tune in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake early, you being a fly on the brocade-draped wall, and the first thing you notice isn't the gold or the guards, but the kitchens. Not just one kitchen, mind you. The Mughal royal kitchens, or Bawarchi Khana, are a network of rooms, courtyards, storage vaults, spice drying platforms, and water-cooled pantries. It's like if a five-star hotel kitchen, a chemist's lab, and a small village had a very organized baby. At the break of each day, the massive machine of imperial breakfast creaks into motion, and the timing is precise. After all, His Majesty doesn't just eat, he receives his breakfast, warm, fragrant, ceremonial, like a gift from heaven. Because in the Mughal mindset, food isn't just sustenance, it's cosmic alignment, it's divine right, it's at times even weaponized diplomacy. And it absolutely must arrive before the emperor gets cranky. So the staff starts with fire. Everything, tea, rice, breads, stews, requires steady, even heat. And that means wood. Great piles of sandalwood, neem, and mango tree are brought in at dawn. Yes, even the firewood is aromatic. A lesser empire might burn trash. The Mughals, of course, burn perfume. Next come the spices, measured by moonlight. A small, ancient woman named Jahanara, not to be confused with the princess of the same name, pinches threads of saffron between her thumb and forefinger, muttering a prayer as she grinds them to dust. Cloves, cinnamon bark, black cardamom, each in its own lacquered box. Her movements are slow, not sleepy, but reverent. Historians still argue whether this near-mystical spice preparation was purely ritual, or just a clever way to keep the good stuff from the kitchen thieves. Water carriers, often shirtless and bleary-eyed, bring cool water from cisterns lined with lime plaster. Not just any water either. This is filtered, scented, sometimes even silver-infused water, believed to improve digestion and possibly ward off demons. Does it? The science is fuzzy, but it sure looks pretty in the polished copper jugs. Meanwhile, a side crew begins assembling breakfast trays for the lesser nobles, the harem ladies, and favored guests. Their meals are delicious, sure, but less extravagant. Think yogurt with honey and dates, perhaps a bit of warm paratha folded around fresh cheese. Still, not bad for being slightly less imperial. Now the meat station, the loudest corner of the kitchen, is preparing a light mutton stew, though light is doing a lot of work here. Scented with rose petals and thickened with almond paste, it's technically breakfast, but feels more like pre-lunch. The butcher sharpens his blade with a flourish that's probably unnecessary. But this is breakfast theater, and the audience wears silk. By now, a buttery perfume is seeping under the doors of the palace. You hear the soft clang of a spoon in a copper pot. A breakfast commander of sorts, one of several rotating supervisors appointed by the Mir Bakawal, tastes a spoonful of saffron rice pudding and nods, It's sweet but not cloying, floral but not soapy. In short, it is emperor ready. And what about the emperor? Well, he's still abed, his dreams likely soaked in sandalwood and conquest. Breakfast is not rushed. This isn't a Pop-Tart on the way to a 9 a.m. meeting. This is a slow unveiling, an experience, and it's still just the first course. One young servant boy, barely older than 12, balances a tray with trembling fingers. On it sits a gold-rimmed bowl of lightly steamed pistachios. Not for eating, but for scenting the room. Yes, there's breakfast aroma decor, because obviously. And just as the sun slices a golden blade over the palace courtyard, the first call of a koel bird rings out. That's the cue. Plates are arranged on silk. Napkins are folded with starch made from rice. An elder taster, a role dating back to Babur's time, takes a careful bite of each dish, a necessary safeguard against poison, indigestion, or too much clove. Then, finally, the grand silver doors open. Footsteps echo down the corridor. The emperor is awake. Breakfast is ready. You might think that all this seems over the top for a simple morning meal. But for the Mughals, this was the point. To feed the emperor was to worship, to serve, to affirm the structure of the universe. And you haven't even seen the eggs yet. You follow the smell. That's the first rule of Mughal kitchens. Your nose always knows. Today, the steam wafting through the colonnades is rich, golden, and just faintly nutty. And there, under a canopy of carved teakwood beams, bubbling quietly over a slow fire, is the centerpiece of this morning's imperial breakfast. A massive cauldron of kheer, a kind of creamy rice pudding that's one part comfort food, one part ceremonial offering. But this isn't your cousin's Diwali dessert. This is royal kheer, made with milk simmered for hours until it's thick enough to coat a spoon in velvet. Saffron threads float lazily on top like delicate red seaweed. Chopped pistachios and slivered almonds are added slowly, almost reverently. And the rice? Not just any rice, thank you. This is basmati, hand-selected for aroma and possibly rinsed in rosewater before cooking. Maybe. Historians still argue whether the rose scenting was standard practice or just an extra flourish for festival days. Someone stirs the kheer with a paddle the size of a cricket bat. A cinnamon stick leans idly against the rim of the pot, like it's lounging in a spa. It's not the only rice dish making an appearance this morning. On the other side of the kitchen, a cook, his hair tied up with a strip of muslin, tends to zarda, a sweet, bright yellow rice dish made with ghee, sugar, dried fruits, and often colored with turmeric or saffron. It glows like sunlit marigold. This dish, beloved by emperors like Shah Jahan, was a visual and olfactory event. It was less about satiety and more about joy on a plate. Zarda is what you serve when you want breakfast to say, "Yes, I am rich," and "Yes, my food glitters," and honestly, your stomach growls just looking at it. But not all rice at breakfast is sweet. A little further down the long stone hearth, another dish is quietly puffing away in a copper pot. Khichdi, the gentle, humble cousin. Just lentils and rice, barely spiced, intended for quieter days or fasting mornings. It's the Mughal version of that one hoodie you only wear when you're homesick and emotionally fragile. The emperor, of course, doesn't eat khichdi unless he's in a mood, or unless a court astrologer recommends it, or a Sufi dream interpreter says something ominous about pomegranate seeds. You never really know. A nearby servant, a sleepy-eyed girl named Lajwanti, fans the simmering pots with a woven palm frond. It's not necessary, the fires are well tended, but it's part of the rhythm of the morning. Her motions are slow, circular, hypnotic. There's something almost spiritual about the way these cooks move, the way they handle food. There are no timers, no thermometers, no shouting, just the soft hum of coals and the occasional whistle of a clay kettle. And then you hear it, The unmistakable ping of a sugar gem hitting the floor. You look down. It's a small, candied fennel seed, likely part of a sweetmeat plate being assembled near the fruit station. A young confectioner picks it up, dusts it off, and promptly eats it. A risky move, but bold. Kitchen rules are elastic when you've been up since 3 a.m. Now, one of the head chefs, a man with a braided silver beard and sleeves forever rolled to the elbow, calls out softly, "Slow the flame. Let it rest." He's talking about the kheer, which has reached its peak consistency. A thick blanket of milk solids has begun forming on the surface, a kind of dessert armor. He skims it off and folds it back in, twice like a magician revealing the final card. You trail him as he walks toward the cold room, a vaulted chamber lined with stone and layered with ice blocks brought in from the mountains. Here, the more delicate breakfast elements are stored: jellied fruit, cooled custards, and pitchers of sharbat, sweet drinks flavored with everything from hibiscus to sandalwood. A tray is being readied for Princess Roshanara. Her request? Light rice pudding with rosewater, no pistachio. She's allegedly allergic, or just picky. It depends who you ask. Meanwhile, a court poet lounges in the breakfast courtyard, scribbling verses about the steam rising from his bowl of zarda. He rhymes saffron with dawn and something about a lover's yawn. No one has the heart to tell him it's not his best work. You start to notice the texture of things, the gentle weight of velvet napkins, the warm gleam of brass utensils polished to a mirror finish. Even the trays have filigreed borders, because heaven forbid an emperor's breakfast should be served on something plain. And then a delivery arrives, a small ceramic jar, sealed with wax and tied with silk cord. The cook opens it, sniffs, and smiles. It's mewa dana, a mixture of puffed lotus seeds, cardamom, and edible camphor, meant to be sprinkled sparingly on the rice pudding. A finishing touch with more than a little medicinal lore behind it. Some believed it soothed digestion, others said it brought vivid dreams, and one courtier once swore it helped him grow a third eyebrow. That part may have been poetic license. Still, every breakfast has its rituals, its flourishes. And as the trays are finally lifted, carefully, like relics, you realize that this meal is more than food. It's a performance, an offering, a silent steaming poem made of rice, milk, and impossible patience. So as the emperor takes his first spoonful, his gaze still half lidded with sleep, you can almost hear the collective exhale of 50 people who made it happen. It's not the fanfare of war or the splendor of a royal wedding, but in its own quiet, fragrant way, Mughal breakfast is just as majestic. Now you might think eggs are simple. Crack, fry, done. But here in the Mughal court, eggs are a philosophical situation. They spark debates, inspire poems, and, on more than one occasion, ignite quiet culinary feuds that ripple through the kitchen staff for weeks. Let's set the scene. It's a humid morning in Lahore. The sky is slightly overcast, and the emperor, today it's Jahangir, has awoken with a craving. Not for pearls, not for poetry, but for a perfectly soft-boiled egg. Not hard, not runny, not somewhere in between. Perfectly. Cue the panic. The egg station, tucked near the eastern end of the imperial kitchen, goes into high alert. There are precisely 5 eggs being considered for the royal tray, each examined under a sliver of morning light like crown jewels. They're from royal hens, of course, hand-fed a diet of poppy seeds, herbs, and apparently minor flattery. The head of the egg detail, yes, that's a thing, a man known only as Tilu, is sweating. Not just from the charcoal fire. He's done this 100 times, but today feels risky. The emperor once declared a hard yoke to be a culinary betrayal. Another time, a yoke broke too soon and a serving boy was reassigned to goat-watching duty in Kabul. Now, to be fair, not all Mughal emperors were this egg-sensitive. Babur, the first in the line, found boiled eggs useful travel food, but considered them uninspiring. Humayun reportedly preferred them pickled in vinegar, which may explain why his morning breath had historical consequences. Akbar? He was more of a give me something simple and soul-filling kind of guy. But Jahangir? Oh, he's the diva of the yolk world. The eggs are boiled in clay pots, not metal, to avoid any metallic aftertaste. And the water is first flavored, yes, flavored, with a pinch of salt, fennel, and sometimes even rose petals. Historians still argue whether this floral seasoning actually changed the taste or was just a power flex. But soft boiling is just one option. Across the long table of breakfast preparations, you spot other forms taking shape. Egg curry, spiced lightly with cinnamon and green cardamom, rests in a shallow brass bowl. It's not quite a lunch dish, thanks to its mellow spice profile and a generous ladle of cream added near the end. The eggs are peeled with extraordinary care, their whites unblemished, like porcelain. The whole presentation looks more like sculpture than sustenance. Then there's the ever whimsical stuffed egg, a favorite of Shah Jahan's breakfast table. The yolk is mashed with saffron, chopped pine nuts, and a touch of clove, then reinserted into the hollow egg white. Arranged like tiny pale boats on green banana leaves, these eggs are meant to amuse the eye and delight the tongue. They are, in essence, Mughal deviled eggs, though decidedly less sinful sounding. A passing cook whispers a joke. If you upset the egg steward, your yolks come back cursed. You chuckle, quietly. Kitchen superstition runs deep, and it's not unheard of for ingredients to turn bad out of spite, or so they say. But it's not just how the eggs are cooked, it's when. Mughal astrology plays a role in daily decisions, and eggs, being spherical, are considered slightly magical. On auspicious days, the first egg is offered, not to the emperor, but to the sun, just lifted toward the sky in silent gesture, then eaten by the most senior cook. A small, savory prayer, if you will. Today, the tray is ready. 2 soft-boiled eggs nestled in silver cups lined with velvet napkins. Seriously. A folded slice of spiced flatbread to dip, and a sprig of coriander balanced delicately on the side, purely for color. You float beside the server as he carries the tray down a corridor, lined with pietra dura inlays of birds, flowers, and vines. The door to the private breakfast chamber opens quietly. Jahangir is already seated, robes loose, beard uncombed. He looks suspicious. Of the eggs? Of the entire universe? You can't tell. He lifts the spoon. He breaks the yolk. It oozes perfectly. The court astrologer nods. The kitchen exhales. The empire lives to breakfast another day. Not everyone in the palace gets soft-boiled perfection, of course. In the harem, eggs are scrambled with ginger and turmeric, wrapped in little breads for on-the-go snacking. Children of the nobility might be served eggs, sweetened with jaggery and fried into curious omelets that taste more like dessert. And the guards? Boiled hard, sliced, dusted with salt, and probably eaten standing up. There's even mention in a courtier's diary of an egg dish steamed inside hollowed-out oranges. Whether this actually happened or was just something he dreamed while sampling too much rose syrup, we may never know. But it does paint a picture of just how wildly inventive Mughal breakfast could be. Eggs, for all their humble beginnings, were a symbol of perfection, of patience, and, on less lucky days, of peril. You wonder how many dynasties have toppled over something as simple as a too firm yolk. But here, in the soft, golden light of a Mughal morning, the eggs have done their job. The emperor is pleased. The cooks will live. And you? You've just witnessed the most high-stakes soft boil in recorded history. You drift now toward the hearth that feels more like a blacksmith's forge than a breakfast nook. It's the bread station, and this corner of the imperial kitchen is hotter, louder, and frankly more dangerous than anywhere eggs or pudding dare venture. It's not chaos, it's choreography. Tandoors blaze like miniature volcanoes. Flatbreads fly from hand to stone to cloth-lined baskets in an endless cycle of flour, fire, and finesse. Welcome to the realm of Mughal breakfast bread, an unsung hero of the empire's morning ritual. First, you meet the roti squad. These men, barefoot, shirtless, lightly dusted in flour like living loaves, are rolling out rotis with such speed and consistency, you'd think they were trained by some kind of ancient carb deity. Each disc of dough is flattened with the heel of a hand, spun once in the air, then slapped against the hot stone wall of a tandoor. A few seconds later, it puffs like a balloon. A quick flick of an iron hook pulls it free, and into the basket it goes. Over and over, poof, puff, hook, stack. Now don't be fooled into thinking all rotis are created equal. This isn't your average wheat circle. These are rumali rotis, so thin they could double as handkerchiefs. Hence the name, rumal, meaning handkerchief. Folded and steamed with ghee, they become soft as silk and impossible to stop eating. One emperor allegedly went through 12 in a single sitting. He later napped for 5 hours. Related? Probably. Next comes sheer mal, the rich saffron-infused, sweetened flatbread that smells like a bakery in paradise. Made with flour, milk, and just a touch of sugar, it's brushed with melted butter and baked slowly until the edges crisp and the center remains delightfully chewy. Often served with cream or fruit, it straddles the line between bread and dessert. Some claim it was inspired by Persian recipes. Others argue for Central Asian roots. Historians still debate its exact origin, but everyone agrees. Sheer mal is the breakfast diva. Further down, you catch sight of parathas, layered, flaky, pan-fried, and usually stuffed. What's inside? Could be crushed nuts, spiced lentils, mashed potatoes, or even mincemeat, depending on the mood of the chef or the dreams of the emperor. One morning, Shah Jahan asked for mango-stuffed paratha. It took 3 days to get the consistency right, but by the end of the week, it had a standing spot on the breakfast menu. At this point, your nose has basically levitated out of your face and is hovering above the griddle. And just when you think you've seen every form of wheat imaginable, a cook walks by carrying something that looks suspiciously like a crescent moon on a serving board. It's bakar khani, a thick, crunchy, laminated bread layered with ghee, caraway seeds, and the occasional raisin. Somewhere between a biscuit and a pastry, it crumbles in your mouth and leaves behind a warm, toasty sweetness. Often dipped into tea or hot milk, it's the quiet intellectual of the bread family, not flashy but deeply satisfying. You pause for a moment, mesmerized by the rhythm. Bread hits tandoor, butter hisses, a spatula clangs, flour dust spirals into a ray of sunlight slicing through the kitchen smoke. Somewhere, a bird trills. It's not just breakfast, it's ballet. Bread in the Mughal Empire wasn't filler food, it was statement food. Baked golden, brushed with saffron, presented with edible silver leaf. It was meant to symbolize prosperity, abundance, and a controlled mastery of the elements: fire, air, water, earth. You wrap them all up in a steaming flatbread and serve it to a man who rules an empire the size of Western Europe. And what did emperors do with all this bread? Some dipped it delicately into curried lentils, others rolled it into spoons for soft cheese or egg custard. Humayun reportedly liked his roti overdone, almost burnt, leading some to believe he secretly enjoyed chewing. Akbar, ever the minimalist, liked sheermal with rose jam and a single fig. And then there's Aurangzeb, who considered rich breads indulgent and often fasted through breakfast altogether. He was no fun at brunch. Back in the kitchens, a brief debate breaks out over whether to make naan for the visiting Persian envoy. One cook insists naan is too dinner, but the diplomat's known preference for chewy flatbread wins the argument. A fresh batch is slapped into the clay ovens, round, glossy, and sprinkled with black sesame. Nearby, a nervous apprentice is practicing his first roti flip. He tosses it, it lands on his head, and everyone pretends not to laugh too loudly. No one wants to get reassigned to turnip washing duty for breaking the sacred silence of morning bread. And you? You float, you breathe in the toasty sweet perfume of breakfast carbs, and you realize you're surrounded by the oldest, most comforting miracle of civilization. Someone, somewhere, figured out how to turn grain and water into joy. As the trays are stacked and lined with silk napkins, the bread begins its procession out of the kitchen and toward royal mouths. Not a single corner is burnt, not a single fold misplaced. Bread, the Mughal way, is a love letter written in flour, warm, soft, layered, meant to be torn, shared, and remembered. And you've seen the rice, you've witnessed the egg drama, you've basked in the golden glory of imperial breads. But now your journey takes a colorful turn, tropical even. As you turn the corner of the imperial kitchens, it hits you, the crisp, syrupy perfume of freshly sliced mango. And not just any mango. This is the Langra mango, the undisputed favorite of Emperor Akbar, who allegedly claimed it could turn even the sourest enemy sweet. You wouldn't be surprised if mango diplomacy saved a few border skirmishes in its day. Here, under a lattice of shaded arches and near a shallow pool meant to keep things cool, you find the fruit station. It's the quietest corner of the kitchen and the most beautiful. Bright bowls of pomegranate seeds glisten like rubies. Halved figs nestle against thin slices of guava. Dates gleam with a syrupy sheen. This isn't just breakfast, it's an imperial art installation. The Mughal emperors, descended from Central Asian conquerors, brought with them a fierce appreciation for fruit. It was portable, it was poetic, and it didn't require a goat or a fire pit. Fruit symbolized not just health and luxury, but control over nature itself. After all, what's more regal than commanding trees to bear sweetness just in time for breakfast? And so they imported, cultivated, and worshipped fruit in all forms. Akbar reportedly commissioned the planting of thousands of mango trees across the empire. In his court, fruit wasn't sliced, it was sculpted. Watermelon carved into lotus blooms, pears shaved into swans, melons hollowed and refilled with rose-scented cream. Today, the emperor is receiving a morning fruit platter, hand-curated with more precision than your last tax audit. Each item has a reason for being there. Balance of temperature? Yes. Fruits had hot and cold energies. Color harmony, seasonal symbolism, and, of course, digestive support. Because nothing says power like regulating your imperial bowels with seasonal produce. On the side, a tiny bowl of black salt, kala namak, used to dip slices of green mango for a tangy wake-up kick. According to court rumors, one noble once mistook it for sugar and declared mangoes horribly cursed. He was never invited back to breakfast. Over in the harem kitchens, fruit plays a slightly different role. It's served more privately, often chilled with curd or folded into sweet dishes. But in the emperor's view, fruit is spectacle, a declaration. Shah Jahan, for example, favored custard apples arranged in spirals, drizzled with honey imported from Kashmir. And then there's jamun, the inky purple berry that stains your fingers and your lips. It was said to bring coolness to the body and mystery to romantic poetry. One Mughal prince supposedly compared his lover's eyes to a pair of overripe jamuns. The poem didn't win awards, but the berries stayed on the breakfast table. In one corner of the station, you spot a giant clay urn. Inside, sharbat-e-anar, pomegranate juice steeped with sugar and a hint of basil seed. Cold, tart, refreshing. This wasn't your average juice. It was served in jade cups, believed to infuse the drink with calming energy. Historians still argue whether that was science or superstition, but honestly, you'd drink anything out of jade. You hover above a silver tray being prepared for a guest from the Deccan Plateau. The chefs have added slices of papaya, a nod to regional taste, and a rare fruit called bale, astringent, cooling, and apparently capable of curing nearly everything, including hot-headedness. Whether that's a real condition or just code for troublesome guests, no one can say. And then, like the rising climax of a fruity opera, the mangoes return, not sliced this time, juiced, blended with saffron and cardamom into a thick golden nectar, served in shallow porcelain bowls and sipped slowly. It's practically a smoothie, but calling it that would get you banished. It was believed that mango pulp warmed the soul and opened the tongue, which made it a favorite before diplomatic negotiations. Imagine beginning a tense treaty meeting by saying, "Please, enjoy this mango sludge before we discuss borders." In today's breakfast, fruit takes the role of appetizer and dessert. Light, cleansing, showy. It fills in the gaps between heavier dishes and provides a cooling contrast to the richness of bread and stews. A young kitchen boy, no taller than a fruit crate, sneaks a sliver of melon from a tray and immediately earns a playful swat with a banana leaf. Everyone smiles. In the fruit zone, tempers stay mild. There's something about mangoes that makes tyranny feel impossible. You follow one of the trays as it's carried through a colonnade where marble inlays shimmer in the sunlight. The fruit is fanned out in precise angles, sprinkled with rose petals, and surrounded by tiny sprigs of mint. It is ridiculously beautiful. It will be eaten in 3 minutes. But the point was never longevity. The point was beauty, abundance, and pleasure. The Mughal emperors didn't just eat fruit, they ruled it. And as the tray disappears through the doorway, you're left with the faint scent of ripe guava and the memory of a kingdom that measured its power in mangoes. Now you find yourself somewhere quieter, cooler, almost meditative. Gone is the sizzle of bread or the blinding citrus of mangoes. Here in a low-ceilinged annex of the kitchen complex, stone walls are lined with urns, jugs, and softly bubbling clay pots. The light is dim, filtered through intricately carved screens that scatter floral shadows across the floor. You've stepped into the soothing, peculiar world of yogurt, or more properly, dahi. Yogurt at a Mughal breakfast isn't just a side dish. It's a presence, a philosophy, a texture meant to bridge worlds, the hot with the cold, the rich with the mild, the spiced with the gentle. And it's everywhere. You see it first in the form of a clay pot the size of your head, resting in a shallow pool of cool water. Inside, a thick, creamy dahi, strained to near solid perfection. No machines, no refrigeration, just a careful balance of culture, time, and temperature. Dahi is made fresh each evening and left to set overnight, like a sleepy gift from the moon. Today's yogurt has a thin crust of cream on top. A silver spoon skims it gently, preserving the layers. One bowl will be served plain, chilled. Another will be salted, whisked, and spiced. A savory lassi of sorts. A third will be sweetened with jaggery, sprinkled with poppy seeds, and offered as the final note to breakfast. But there's more. The emperor's personal dahi, that's been treated like a VIP since dawn. The milk came from royal cows. Yes, those are a thing, who are allegedly sung to while being milked. Whether this is superstition or the world's first dairy-based wellness program, historians still debate. Once the milk was boiled, it was cooled with methodical care. A starter culture, passed down by the head yogurt maker's grandmother and her grandmother and so on, was folded in, whispered over, and left to do its quiet magic. A note was left on top. Do not jostle. It's unclear if this was for the servants or the ghosts. Yogurt wasn't merely food. It was believed to bring balance. According to Unani medicine, which influenced much of Mughal healthcare and diet, dahi was cooling, soothing, and could prevent an alarming number of internal disasters. Indigestion, dahi. Insomnia, dahi. Spiritual unrest? Maybe try some dahi with fennel. The logic was fuzzy, but the taste was not. You peer over the shoulder of a young cook garnishing small bowls of dahi with toasted cumin and mint leaves. Another tray nearby holds a stranger version, yogurt topped with rose petal jam. The scent is heady, sweet, floral, oddly grounding. That version will go to the harem, where yogurt is more than a breakfast item. It's also a face mask, a hair conditioner, and according to one lady-in-waiting's journal, a diplomatic peace offering during gossip-induced tension. Meanwhile, outside in the courtyard, a burly man with a fantastically twirled mustache is churning a tall pot of lassi with a wooden paddle. He works rhythmically, sweat dripping from his brow, but there's pride in every swirl. This isn't your casual mango lassi from a modern restaurant. This is the ancestral form, just yogurt, water, a pinch of salt, and sometimes a crushed green chili. You take a deep breath. It smells sharp, alive, restorative. The churner pauses, dips a cup, and passes it to a palace guard leaning against a pillar. The man drinks, sighs, and thumps his chest approvingly. "Good batch," he says, and wanders off into the rising heat of the day. But perhaps the most curious sight of all is the talisman bowl. In one secluded alcove, set apart from the bustle, sits a lidded silver dish filled with dahi. A small amulet rests in its center. This yogurt isn't to be eaten. It's symbolic, meant to protect the emperor from imbalance, jealousy, and flatulence, if the cook's notes are to be believed. Now, of course, not everyone in the court took yogurt seriously. Prince Darashikoh, spiritual and skeptical, considered it a humble food best left to humble people. On the other hand, his brother Aurangzeb reportedly fasted with only yogurt and dried figs for weeks at a time, considering it an aid to moral clarity. Scholars are still unsure if this made him more disciplined or just deeply grumpy. And what of the breakfast plates? Dahi often found itself tucked beside other items like a patient, cooling sidekick. Next to spicy lentils, it offered relief. With fruit, it was indulgent. Stirred into rice, it became comfort food. Served alone, it was a ritual. And always, it was respected. Back in the kitchens, you watch a finishing touch. A dot of edible silver leaf pressed gently atop a bowl of saffron yogurt blend. It doesn't add flavor, but it adds gravity. You know, in case you forgot, you're eating like royalty. There's a peaceful energy in this part of the kitchen. The hustle of bread making is far away, and the flames of meat stews haven't yet flared. Here, it's quiet, cool, introspective. You understand now why yogurt became a symbol of inner balance in a world of outer grandeur. As one final tray departs, its tiny clay bowls clinking softly like chimes, you float after it, carried along by the scent of curd, mint, and rose. This is the calm before the spice storm. The air changes as you move again. Heavier now, more complex. The sharp tang of yogurt fades behind you, replaced by something meatier, deeper. There's an unmistakable scent of cardamom swirling with garlic, a hint of cinnamon dancing behind a veil of smoke. Somewhere, a clove pops in hot oil. You've arrived at the domain of a surprising yet surprisingly common Mughal morning indulgence. Meat for breakfast. Yes, meat. At sunrise. And not just any meat. Today the kitchen is preparing pigeon stew. You pause. Pigeon? Really? Yes, really. And before your modern palate rebels, know this. Pigeon, or kabutar, was considered a refined delicacy in the Mughal court. Small, tender, quick to cook, and when raised in palace aviaries and fed a diet of saffron-laced grains, frankly, probably living better than most nobility in neighboring kingdoms. The pot bubbles thickly now. A stew, shorba, has been simmering since just before dawn. Made with onions browned low and slow, garlic pounded into a paste, a dozen different spices, blended by a man who hasn't written anything down in 30 years, and of course, a whole clutch of pigeons. The meat is tender. The bones? Delicate enough to chew if you're brave. One courtier reportedly claimed that pigeon bones crunched like almonds, but with more poetry. Historians still argue whether this was an actual review or just a hungry metaphor. This stew is served with flatbread or saffron rice, often with a wedge of lime, a sprinkle of dried rose petals, and sometimes a swirl of thickened yogurt. Because Mughal breakfasts are not bound by your modern ideas of food pairing logic. You move to the next brazier, where small mutton kebabs sizzle on skewers, turned carefully by a cook who looks both sleepy and divine. Each piece is marinated in green papaya to tenderize it overnight. The papaya doesn't add flavor, just breaks things down gently like a massage therapist for meat. The result? Melts on your tongue kebabs that taste like morning victory. But why so much meat in the morning? Simple. power. For emperors, generals, and nobles who spent mornings in council, afternoons in court, and evenings hunting tigers or navigating royal intrigue, meat was fuel. And in Mughal belief systems, it wasn't just food. It was hot food, energetically speaking. It gave warmth, vigor, passion. Some believed it sharpened the mind. Others argued it stirred the blood. Aurangzeb, famously austere, limited his meat consumption during morning hours, favoring boiled lentils and fruit. But Babur? He once reportedly had lamb cooked 3 ways before his morning prayers. The early Mughals, especially with their Central Asian roots, were no strangers to starting the day with a bit of roasted flesh. Today's breakfast also features quail, stuffed with nuts, raisins, and spiced rice, then gently roasted over coals until the skin crisps. It's a showpiece dish, served to foreign visitors or used to impress political rivals. Think of it as the Mughal version of offering someone a latte with gold leaf foam and a sincere smile. Meanwhile, tucked in a quieter corner, a pot of nihari simmers. Now more commonly associated with later meals, this rich, bone marrow-laced stew actually began as a breakfast dish, especially for the soldiers and heavy-lifting types of the imperial machine. The name itself comes from nahar, meaning morning. It's meant to cook overnight, often 12 hours or more, so by dawn it's a velvety, deeply spiced, gelatin-rich dream. Served with naan and a nap, heavy on the nap. You watch as a server garnishes the nahari with slivers of ginger, green chili, and a final flourish of lime juice. It smells like courage. And cholesterol. Not every dish is so serious. Some of the meat offerings are almost playful. There's a tray of minced lamb cakes, stuffed with crushed pistachios and topped with edible silver. They're bite-sized, almost dainty, a kind of savory truffle. One story claims that Jahangir once hid love notes in these cakes, folding parchment slips into the soft centers before sending them to a lady of the harem. You're unsure if that's romantic or a choking hazard. Maybe both. There's even meat porridge, believe it or not. Barley boiled with lamb stock, spiced gently, and stirred with milk until it becomes an oddly soothing mash. It's the kind of breakfast you'd eat if you had to hold court for 8 hours and wrestle a cheetah before lunch. Still, it's not all indulgence. As with all things in the Mughal world, there's balance. Alongside the meat are trays of pickled onions, fresh coriander, mint chutneys, and little bowls of pomegranate seeds to cool the flame. A sip of buttermilk, a bite of quail, a scoop of yogurt. Every mouthful orchestrated to sustain, stimulate, and, if needed, seduce. You watch a cook wipe his brow and whisper a quiet prayer over the last dish. There's respect in every movement. This isn't fast food. It's slow strength, centuries in the making. The meat tray is wrapped in linen to hold in the heat. It disappears down a hallway, off to nourish a man who must make 50 decisions before midday. And as the scent lingers behind, curling upward like incense, you realize this is breakfast not just for kings but for empires. You follow a sound now, soft gurgling, like a stream flowing somewhere inside the palace walls. But it's not water you're hearing. It's something being slowly poured from one vessel into another, again and again. Swish. Glug. Swish. Welcome to the liquid layer of the Mughal breakfast, the world of perfumed waters, herbal tonics, and curious elixirs that are sipped, not slurped, and sometimes never even swallowed at all. You're in a chamber lined with glazed blue tiles, cooler than the rest of the kitchen complex. The morning sun hasn't yet reached here, and inside, everything smells faintly of sandalwood and dried orange peel. The space feels ancient, older than even the dynasty that occupies it. In the center, an attendant pours a clear, shimmering liquid from one long-necked decanter to another. This isn't showmanship, it's aeration. They're preparing gulab pani, rose water, not for drinking necessarily, but for rinsing fingers before and after breakfast. A perfumed ritual meant to refresh the senses. And, if legend is to be believed, to repel evil spirits from sneaking in through the cuticles. Beside it sits cura water, extracted from the pandanus flower, sweet and green-smelling, used either to scent dishes or served in tiny cups to sip, or swirl, or sometimes just to admire. But not all liquids in the Mughal morning are decorative. Many are functional, deeply functional. Like the herbal tonics steeped overnight by palace physicians who double as spiritual counselors. These drinks have names like Majuni Taskin or Sharbat-i-Narangi, and their purposes range from cooling the liver to lifting melancholia to promoting, let's say, imperial regularity. One servant passes by carrying a tray of tiny glass bottles, each corked and labeled in curling Persian script. One holds a pale yellow syrup, lemon balm and coriander for clarity. Another contains a deep purple tonic made from crushed violet petals, fennel seed, and sugar. It's allegedly good for nightmares or overly vivid dreams. The two are easily confused in Mughal medical texts. The emperor this morning has requested a saffron milk, served warm. The milk, drawn from the royal cow herd, is infused with strands of saffron soaked overnight and stirred with honey and cardamom. It's served in a goblet shaped like a tulip, because of course the Mughals never missed an aesthetic opportunity. It's said that this drink stimulates digestion, soothes the heart, and improves the voice. Shah Jahan was known to hum after sipping it. Aurangzeb naturally called it decadent and asked for plain water instead. But the real star of the liquid lineup today is pan-infused sherbet, a cloudy green potion made from betel leaves steeped in rosewater and mint, thickened with sugar, and chilled over cracked ice imported from Kashmir. You catch a whiff. It's pungent, herbal, strangely invigorating. One sip, and you feel like you've brushed your soul's teeth. Then there's buttermilk spiced with roasted cumin, sandalwood-infused barley water, and even almond milk flavored with saffron and date syrup, a beverage so smooth and creamy that one noble once described it as what angels would drink after a thunderstorm nap. And we haven't even mentioned coffee. Yes, kahwa, a strong, bitter brew introduced from Arabia and slowly adopted by the Mughal elite. Not yet the morning staple it would become in later empires, but already gaining popularity. Brewed thick and dark, then poured into tiny porcelain cups. Not for everyone, though. Akbar found it too stimulating. Jahangir embraced it in moderation, and one court physician warned that more than one cup might cause spontaneous poetry, which frankly sounds like a reason to drink it. The emperor's cup today contains something simpler. Warm water with crushed basil seed meant to gently wake the system. But nearby, a guest from Persia receives a drink made of pounded melon and milk, laced with cinnamon. Each cup is tailored, not just to taste, but to temperament, to season, to status. Some of the court ladies prefer their drinks served in frozen cups. Yes, that's right. Cups chilled with tiny cubes of mountain ice wrapped in cloth and pressed inside the vessel for a few minutes before pouring. The Mughal kitchen was, in essence, running a 17th century wellness bar with extremely selective entry. You peer into a tall glass jug filled with a clear herbal solution. Floating inside are tiny red threads, saffron, green leaves, tulsi, and a single slice of dried plum. It's called Sharbat-i-Suba, sherbet of the morning. A few drops are added to a cup of water and served before the first bite of food. It's meant to awaken the senses, settle the belly, and whisper gently to the liver, "Today you will be brave." A boy drops a porcelain bottle and it shatters. The liquid puddles across the floor, releasing a scent of lavender and something musky. Everyone freezes. The head of liquid preparations walks over, sniffs, sighs, and says, "At least it wasn't the saffron." Crisis averted. As the cups are arranged on silver trays and carried to the inner court, the clink of glass and ceramic joins the chorus of breakfast sounds. These aren't rushed gulps. These are sips, intentional, healing, often ceremonial. Some drinks are consumed between courses, others before, and some not at all, just held, swirled, and admired like rare jewels. One particularly odd tradition: the silent cup. A goblet of perfumed water placed near the emperor's seat but never touched. It's symbolic, a reminder of restraint, of beauty admired but not consumed. Or maybe it's just there in case someone spills something spicy. Either way, you feel the rhythm now. Sip, chew, chat, pause, sip again. The Mughal breakfast, with all its drama and detail, still makes space for quiet hydration. The air grows more secretive now. You step through a heavy embroidered curtain, and the world softens. The clang of ladles fades, replaced by the hush of whispered instructions and the occasional delicate laugh. The light is different here, filtered, gold-tinted, smelling of rose and sandalwood. You've entered a private realm of the Mughal kitchens, the domain of harem cooks and secret recipes, where the food is just as exquisite, but far more mysterious. Unlike the sprawling, bustling public kitchens, this section is smaller, warmer, and filled with shadowed alcoves where quiet genius simmers. These cooks, mostly women, a few trusted eunuchs, don't bark orders. They glide, they taste, they whisper, they concoct. And while the emperor's meals get all the glory, what happens here shapes Mughal cuisine just as much. A squat clay stove burns low in the corner, and on top of it sits a brass pan where milk is being reduced, slowly, reverently, to make rabrai, a thick, sweet cream laced with cardamom and saffron. It will be served with rice or spooned over dried fruit. One legend says the Princess Jahanara invented her own twist on rabri by folding in candied rose petals and slivered pistachios. That version became known in palace circles as Scheherazade Rabri, Princess Cream. Whether that's fact or flattery, historians still argue. But not all harem dishes are desserts. You catch a scent that surprises you. Fenugreek, garlic, and pomegranate molasses. A stew is simmering, faintly tart, made with black chickpeas and sweet onions. It's meant for a noblewoman who fasts until sunrise and then insists on something both humble and filling. The recipe? Not recorded. Passed down orally, from hand to hand, with silent nods and elbow nudges. Mughal cookbook pages rarely mention the harem kitchen, perhaps out of respect or perhaps because no one outside was allowed to know. In another corner, an elderly woman grinds something with rhythmic intensity. You peer closer: dried dates, poppy seeds, black pepper, and almond oil. She's making a morning tonic said to strengthen memory, lighten the eyes, and ensure pleasing conversation. A harem exclusive, served only in tiny ceramic bowls painted with fig leaves. The woman mutters to herself, "The last girl who overboiled this lost her eyebrow hair for a month." You're pretty sure she's joking. Probably. You move quietly along a row of marble counters, each set with small bowls and cups, more like a painter's palette than a cooking station. One contains crushed lotus seed, another powdered rose petal, a third a pale green paste of mint and pine nut. These are the finishing touches. Used not to alter flavor drastically, but to suggest mood. Food in the harem wasn't just nourishment, it was expression, a quiet rebellion, a flirtation, an apology. Sometimes all three on one tray. A girl no older than 16 folds stuffed parathas into triangles, tucking a tiny message inside one, pressed into a walnut half and wrapped in waxed fig leaf. This isn't espionage, it's breakfast flirting. Kitchen gossip says she's hoping her note reaches the son of a vizier. Others say she's actually sending it to his sister. You're not here to judge. You're just here for the parathas. But there's more than play here. There's precision. Every harem kitchen had its own flavor signature, a unique blend of herbs or a secret way of roasting cardamom or fermenting mango pickles. Some of these blends were so fiercely guarded that they were disguised, mislabeled, or wrapped in layers of misleading spice. One blend, known only as Zuleika's Mix, supposedly included 15 ingredients, none of which were ever written down. A courtier once tried to bribe a harem attendant for the recipe and was served unsalted stew for a week. He never tried again. The eunuchs, trusted keepers of kitchen integrity, had their own rules. No men were allowed past a certain archway. Ingredients were counted before and after preparation. And most intriguingly, some dishes were tested for sound. Yes, listened to. A particular pudding, for example, was judged ready, not by taste or look, but by the sound it made when a spoon was tapped on its surface. It had to be a soft plop, not a wet splat. You can't make this up. In one sunlit alcove, a woman sits arranging sweet betel leaves, stuffing them with coconut, fennel, and crushed clove. They're wrapped into tight little diamonds, glistening with edible camphor. These are digestive finishers, offered not just for freshness but as tokens of care. One version contains powdered saffron and ground pearl, intended only for the emperor's mother. It said she once refused to speak to anyone until her morning pan was perfect. She ruled a small kingdom of manners and mint. And still, even with the grandeur and the secrecy, there's playfulness here. Someone sings softly as they whip cream. Someone else ties a ribbon around a tray of fruit and sweet cheese. A laugh echoes. Then silence again, as hands go back to work. It's a rhythm, a ritual, a protected art. You can feel the weight of tradition and the delight of invention coexisting in every movement. As one tray leaves the room, stuffed dates arranged like a crown, little yogurt cups with dried rose petals floating like boats, you catch a glance from one of the cooks. Her face is expressionless, but her eyes say, "You didn't see anything." And just like that, the curtain closes behind you. The harem kitchen disappears, its flavors locked behind embroidered veils and cinnamon secrets. You're back in the main palace now, the air heavier with the scent of incense and anticipation. The morning meal has been prepared with near religious precision, but the food alone isn't the whole story. Not by a long shot. Because in the Mughal court, how you ate was just as important as what you ate. This is where it all comes together. The emperor's dining rituals. The first thing to understand, you don't just walk in and start munching. Mughal breakfast, especially for the emperor, is a performance, an experience, a deeply choreographed act of power, piety, and pleasure. If you're lucky enough to be present and visible, you're there to watch, not participate. It begins with the washing of hands, performed with rosewater poured over fingers into a basin of hammered silver. A servant kneels silently, holding a towel embroidered with tulips, drying each finger with the reverence of someone polishing a sacred relic. The emperor does not touch the towel, it touches him. Now, seated on a low cushion, he reclines against silk bolsters, back supported, robes draped just so, turban impeccable. The tray arrives. Not a plate, mind you, a tray, often the size of a small dining table, sometimes inlaid with precious stones, sometimes simply lacquered wood. Each bowl is placed in a precise location. Warm dishes closer, cold drinks to the left. Spoon? Optional. Fingers? Expected. Washed, scented, and ringless for ease. Every dish has its place. The sheermal is folded, not stacked. The soft-boiled egg is pre-scored, not cracked. The silver bowl of yogurt has a shallow groove in the side so it can rest against a napkin without tipping. You start to realize this isn't just etiquette, it's engineering. And the first bite? That's a ritual in itself. Sometimes the emperor chooses his own dish. Other times the Mir Bakawal, the head of the royal kitchen, makes a quiet suggestion. Today, Your Majesty, the fig preserve is particularly vibrant. It's not a command. It's culinary diplomacy. One fascinating tradition, the Bismillah bite, an opening morsel taken after whispering a prayer, sometimes offered to a child or noble seated nearby. A gesture of grace, but also a clever move. If the food is off, the emperor isn't the first to find out. Cynical? Maybe. Strategic? Definitely. Then comes the chewing. And yes, even this is loaded. Mughal emperors chewed thoughtfully, slowly, no slurping, no crunching. To eat noisily was to behave like a goat, or worse, a European. A court poet once described Jahangir's breakfast style as the silence of moonlight kissing saffron. Pretentious? Sure, but probably accurate. You glance to the side and notice the taster, always present, always silent. He's already sampled each dish earlier, but during the meal, he remains nearby, watching. Not just for signs of poisoning, but for imperial signals. A raised eyebrow could mean the pomegranate is underripe. A twitch of the nostril might mean the yogurt was served slightly too cold. It's part breakfast, part ballet, part spy novel. At times, music is played. A soft tabla, a single flute, something gentle, steady. Nothing too exciting. You don't want your emperor choking on saffron rice because the drummer got ambitious. The music is meant to ease digestion, to set the tone, to make the mango taste just a touch more divine. There are conversation rules too. No politics until the second cup of almond milk. No complaints about the weather if fruit is on the tray. And absolutely no speaking while the emperor is chewing. One courtier forgot that once. He ended up reassigned to royal pigeon care, which, as you now know, is not quite the punishment it sounds like. But still. Then comes the sharing phase. If the emperor is pleased, he might offer bites to others present. Not directly, of course, but via a servant who carefully divides a kebab or spoons some fig preserve onto a secondary plate. To receive food from the emperor's tray is a profound honor and also a potential test. Do you finish it in 3 bites? 4? Do you praise the spice or the tenderness? Say too little and you're ungrateful. Say too much and you sound rehearsed. It's not breakfast, it's court theater. And yet, beneath the pomp, there's something strangely intimate about it all. Jahangir liked to talk softly while he ate, reflections on dreams, on birds he'd seen in the garden, on verses he half remembered from childhood. Akbar sometimes invited visiting philosophers to describe the cosmic balance of flavors, nodding thoughtfully as he dipped paratha into saffron cream. Even the austere Aurangzeb, for all his discipline, was known to hum quietly when he found a particularly good fig. The act of eating was a spiritual bridge between body and soul, between man and ruler, between earth and heavens. Breakfast wasn't fuel, it was order. And when it ends gently. A final cup of rosewater, a damp cloth passed hand to hand, a nod to the musicians, and then silence. A moment of stillness, as the emperor rises and disappears behind a curtain. The tray is lifted, still warm dishes are catalogued. Leftovers, not many, are sent to favored nobles, or occasionally to temple priests. The kitchen, miles away by now, begins to scrub. And you? You exhale, unsure if you just watched a meal or a coronation. One of the servers gently folds the napkin, smooths the pillow, and whispers to no one in particular, "It went well today." And somewhere behind a carved marble screen, an emperor burps, softly, contentedly, and with great dignity. Now that you've witnessed the emperor's slow-motion breakfast theater, let's rewind just a bit. Step back from the velvet bolsters and perfumed napkins and zoom out to see breakfast as more than a solitary act. It was also a tool of diplomacy, a political performance served on silver trays, eaten with soft fingers and sweetened with the kind of flattery that dissolves faster than sugar in warm milk. This is the art of breakfast as diplomacy. You find yourself following a different tray now, not one destined for an emperor's lap, but rather for a foreign envoy newly arrived from Persia, or perhaps he's from the Deccan Sultanates, or maybe from the courts of Kabul. The details blur, as they often do in the fog of flattery. What matters is that he's important and hungry. In Mughal India, diplomacy didn't begin with treaties or letters. It began with breakfast. To invite someone to break the morning fast in your palace was to offer more than food. It was a gesture of trust. You were saying, "Here, eat something warm while we discuss your thinly veiled threats about border trade." It disarmed. It softened. And if you played your flavors right, it impressed just enough to make the next negotiation tip in your favor. This morning, a breakfast has been arranged in a shaded courtyard just inside the southern wing of the Agra fort. A white canopy has been stretched across polished columns. Cushions are laid in gentle curves. Peacocks wander nearby, not by accident. Everything is curated. The menu? A symphony of intended subtleties. A soft goat cheese dish, Persian influence acknowledged. A stew made from dried apricots and lamb, a nod to Central Asian roots. A mango preserve folded in rose petal syrup, an unspoken flex. We have better mangoes than you. And then, of course, the coffee. Served thick and slightly spiced, the coffee is meant to say, we're cosmopolitan. We drink the same thing as the Ottomans, but smoother. It's served in porcelain cups that have traveled farther than most of the guests ever will. Nearby, a small silver dish holds sugar cubes shaped like birds, custom ordered for this very visit. The guest may not eat them, but he'll remember them. One Mughal official stands discreetly by, noting which dishes the envoy favors. Does he linger over the stuffed parathas? Take 2 spoonfuls of fig jam? Ignore the yogurt entirely? These aren't quirks. They're data points. Collected, stored, reported to someone whose next move depends on understanding that this particular diplomat prefers sweet over savory and always reaches for the drink first. Breakfast as surveillance? Absolutely. And not just for outsiders. Internal politics too flowed through the morning meal. A rival noble might be invited to discuss the weather over warm stew, which really meant, let's test your mood, your loyalty, and whether or not you're hiding something. If the food made him sweat, the host made note. If he complimented the chutney too aggressively, it might be a distraction technique. Nothing said, I'm lying, quite like asking for seconds on curried lentils during an awkward silence. But breakfast diplomacy wasn't always sinister. Sometimes it was reconciliation. One famous episode tells of a rift between 2 brothers, both princes, both stubborn, both in love with the same art collector. Long story. After months of silence, Akbar invited them both to breakfast. He didn't speak. He didn't preach. He just sat them down and served them warm sheermal, rosewater-soaked figs, and an absurdly rich saffron pudding. The tension melted faster than the butter on the parathas. They laughed. They ate. They forgave. Historians still argue whether this story is embroidered, but they agree that the Mughal court believed in the power of food to change minds, and nowhere was that more evident than in these quiet, early morning assemblies. You follow another tray now, this one more discreet. It's being delivered to a Rajput princess, married into the imperial family as part of a political alliance. Her breakfast is different, lighter, spiced differently. The chefs consulted with her family's emissaries to learn her taste. Clove instead of cinnamon, thinner yogurt, more pickled mango. A thoughtful adaptation, a small comfort, a quiet message. You are welcome here. We are listening. Whether she felt welcome is harder to say. In yet another example, the Portuguese Jesuit priests invited to court by Akbar received fried bread soaked in wine for breakfast, a peculiar Portuguese-Mughal hybrid created especially for them. They didn't love it, but they appreciated the effort. Cultural bridge building, like paratha making, is never without its lumps. Some of the most delicate negotiations happened before the first bite. Imagine this. You're a noble from a distant land, handed a tray with 20 unfamiliar dishes. Do you eat everything? Just a little? What if you misidentify something spicy and turn red in front of a prince? What if you insult the cook by avoiding a dish sacred in that region? One account mentions a visiting envoy who mistook pan-fried lotus root for fish, refused it due to a fasting vow, and accidentally triggered a week-long diplomatic freeze. It was resolved eventually, with a new breakfast and a handwritten apology recipe. Back in the kitchen, these diplomatic breakfasts required double planning, not just taste, but meaning. The inclusion of your region's grain, a herb your grandfather favored, or a spice mix passed down by your community's cooks. These weren't accidents. They were culinary overtures, not unlike composing music for someone else's ears. Breakfast was not the meal of last resorts. It was the first move on the board. And as the guest leans back on his cushion, sips the last of his almond sherbet, and murmurs a polite compliment about the fig jam, the Mughal host smiles, not because of the words, but because he knows. That fig jam took 2 days to make, and exactly 12 seconds to win an alliance. It's still early, but the light has shifted. Warmer, fuller now. You pass beneath a quiet archway into a room that feels half kitchen, half temple. There are fewer cooks here, fewer sounds. Everything is muted, intentional. The air smells faintly of sandalwood, overripe banana, and something almost medicinal. Perhaps ghee? You've stepped into a peculiar chapter of Mughal culinary history, the era of Akbar's fasting experiments. And yes, fasting. In the middle of the most elaborate breakfast empire known to man, Akbar, third emperor of the dynasty, often skipped his meal entirely, or at least redefined what breakfast meant. You see, Akbar was a man of contradictions, warrior and mystic, empire builder and philosopher. And while his kitchens ran with the usual luxury, saffron stews, mango creams, silver-leaf desserts, his personal food rituals were austere, at times even monastic. Today's breakfast for Akbar: a clay bowl of plain barley porridge, a slice of dried fig, and a small pitcher of water cooled overnight with tulsi leaves. That's it. You blink. This can't be the same kitchen. And yet, here it is. His tray, half empty before it even begins, is spiritual strategy wrapped in culinary restraint. Why the minimalism? Part of it stems from Akbar's deep interest in religion. He was fascinated by multiple faiths: Hinduism, Islam, Jainism, Christianity, and even tried forming his own spiritual movement, the Dini Ilahi, or Religion of God. With it came a focus on temperance, self-discipline, and equality. He wanted to eat, he claimed, like the people he ruled, or at least appear to. But was it sincere? Historians still argue whether Akbar's simple breakfasts were acts of genuine devotion or carefully calculated political theater. After all, when you're ruling a multi-religious, multi-ethnic empire, skipping your egg-stuffed paratha in favor of barley gruel makes you look awfully relatable. One court journal describes an entire week where Akbar fasted from dawn until dusk, even as his cooks prepared grand morning feasts, just in case he changed his mind. The trays were laid out, the spoons polished. He walked past them, smiled, ate a date, then walked away. You pass a kitchen attendant, old and half asleep, who mutters, "He once asked for only a cup of rainwater for breakfast." Rainwater? We had to collect it from the marble drain pipes. He chuckles softly. It tasted terrible, but he drank it like it came from the Ganges. Other times, Akbar wasn't so extreme. He'd have a small rice and lentil mash, lightly spiced with turmeric and ghee, what some modern cooks would call khichdi. When asked why he preferred such simple fare, he reportedly said, "The mouth that commands armies should not ask for dessert." A line so poetic you can almost see the court scribes scrambling to jot it down mid-spoonful. But don't be fooled. His restraint wasn't constant. During festivals, Akbar indulged, and during diplomatic meals, he performed with flair. But his everyday pattern, especially during certain months of spiritual reflection, leaned toward minimalism. His tray might feature boiled chickpeas, a wedge of raw mango, a cube of jaggery. You could count the items on one hand. And yet they were prepared with as much care as a feast for 20. One recipe associated with Akbar's quiet days is especially odd. A drink made from ground almonds, cucumber pulp, and gooseberry juice, intended to cool the temper, brighten the eye, and quiet unclean desires. You raise an eyebrow. Who needed all three at once, you wonder? Still, it smells kind of nice, like a very nervous smoothie. And then there's the incense. Unlike his descendants, who preferred music or poetry with breakfast, Akbar had a bowl of smoldering resin and clove nearby. Not to eat, of course, but to purify the space. According to palace custom, the scent was meant to clarify the mind. Some said it smelled like burned cake. Others said it cleared up headaches. Either way, it stayed burning until the last spoon was down. You hear a story from one cook that Akbar, once ill with fever, asked for only water flavored with sun-dried ginger for a week. The cook brought him more than 20 varieties. Akbar chose one, drank slowly, smiled. "This is the taste of thinking," he said. And yet, even with his fasts and stripped-down trays, Akbar never shut down the kitchen. He ordered the same elaborate spreads to be prepared each morning for the court, his family, his guests. Why? Perhaps because hospitality mattered more than hunger. The empire ate even when he did not. There's a particular type of discipline in that, a quiet kind of power, to be surrounded by sweetness, steam, spice, and still reach for something bitter. Or nothing at all. You glance at his tray now, being cleared, barely touched, just a streak of barley left in the bowl. The tulsi water is still cool. A bird sings nearby. The cook collecting the dishes shrugs. He said the porridge was perfect, then spent 2 hours debating the morality of figs with a monk. You smile. That sounds about right. Here in this corner of the imperial kitchen, the grandeur of saffron and gold is replaced by restraint, reflection, and the occasional fig-fueled philosophical debate. It's not a breakfast you'd sell in a cafe, but it's one that held a strange power over the most powerful man in the subcontinent. And as you follow the fading scent of clove and ghee out of the room, you realize even emperors get tired of rich food. Sometimes you just need a little barley. And a very large idea. The palace grows brighter now, louder too. From the distant courtyard comes the sound of trumpets and bells. No, it's not a wedding or a military parade. It's a hunting expedition. And with it, you're about to witness a very different kind of imperial breakfast. Not served on polished trays in shaded gardens, but assembled in tents, on the move, sometimes from the back of an elephant. Welcome to the world of mobile Mughal breakfasts. You follow a stream of servants hurrying through the back gate of the Agra fort, arms loaded with sacks of flour, bundles of herbs, jars of pickles, and, yes, a small brass tandoor designed to travel. These are the hunting kitchens, a kind of royal food truck avant la lettre. Wherever the emperor goes, breakfast follows. The terrain is dusty, flat, and sun-washed. The emperor, today, let's say it's Jahangir, is preparing for a grand shikar, or hunt. Tigers, wild boar, antelope, birds. The targets vary, but one thing remains constant: a hot breakfast served somewhere between the second arrow and the third dramatic anecdote. The mobile kitchen is already halfway built when you arrive. Tents rise like striped mushrooms. Copper pots are lined up on low wooden tables. A breeze carries the scent of roasted cumin and ghee across the field. Everything feels halfway between a battlefield and a picnic. But make no mistake, this isn't casual. The food must be perfect. If anything, the stakes are higher out here. There's no marble dining room to distract from a rubbery paratha or underspiced stew. If the emperor frowns, it's probably at you. This morning, the cooks prepare a meal designed for portability and punch. On one fire, a pan of keema, spiced minced mutton, is bubbling with green chilies and garlic. It's quick to make, easy to reheat, and delicious wrapped in roti. Speaking of which, a roti maker is already slapping dough onto a convex iron plate balanced over hot stones. No tandoor out here, but necessity breeds innovation. Nearby, a servant fans the coals under a tiny brass kettle. Inside, cardamom tea, brewed strong and dark. No porcelain cups out here. Tin mugs will do, though one of them has been wrapped in velvet just for the emperor. A little ridiculous? Yes, but very on brand. There's also smoked yogurt, packed in earthen jars, flavored with roasted garlic and crushed mustard seed, cooling, protein-rich, and rumored to prevent sunstroke. It's served with wedges of cucumber, a few wild mint leaves, and a dash of powdered salt rubbed with charcoal, an oddly satisfying taste that might be more medicinal than gourmet. One of the most popular field dishes is something the kitchen calls hunter's halwa. It's a thick porridge made from semolina, ghee, nuts, and jaggery, cooked until dense enough to slice and wrap. Think of it as an energy bar for emperors. Dense, sweet, slightly gritty, allegedly good for stamina. Also allegedly favored by the royal cheetahs, who once broke into the storage tent and devoured half the batch. Then there's the stuffed eggplant pickles, a spicy, oily wonder packed into little clay jars. Designed to survive travel, they explode with flavor when eaten over lentil-stuffed flatbread. They're not fancy, but they deliver a punch, and more importantly, they keep. No one wants a breakfast that spoils before the first arrow's loosed. You wander near the emperor's personal tent, its corners pinned with bronze stakes, its fabric dyed with indigo and lined with brocade. Inside, a low table has been set. No tray this time, just plates arranged on a wide cloth. There's spiced chickpea mash, fried fish cooled with vinegar and onion, a bowl of candied melon rind, and a small scroll of folded sheermail wrapped in waxed cloth. Everything is served warm, but not hot. You can't risk tongue burns when issuing imperial decrees. You overhear a servant mumbling, he doesn't like sweat in his bread. Another snaps back, who does? They both laugh but adjust their headscarves tighter. The sun is climbing. The emperor appears, dressed not in court finery but in hunting robes. Still embroidered, still heavy, but meant to move. He nods, sits cross-legged and begins to eat. A bit of keema, a spoon of yogurt, a sip of tea. He says nothing. That's a good sign. One of the guards eats standing up, scooping lentils onto raw onion slices. Nearby, a scribe balances a plate on one knee while writing something about antelope migration. Breakfast here isn't slow. It's efficient, delicious, yes, but built for motion. One young prince insists on pomegranate seeds and goat cheese, even here in the dust. His tray arrives slightly jostled from the elephant ride. He eats in silence, eyes on the horizon, spoon tapping his jade bowl like a drumbeat. And then, just as quickly as it began, the breakfast ends. Cups are cleared, plates are rinsed in a bucket of scented water. The food is packed back into saddlebags. The fires are doused. The emperor wipes his hands on a cloth embroidered with fig leaves, rises and signals. The hunt begins. And the mobile kitchen? It packs up like a traveling circus, ready to reappear 10 miles down the road for second breakfast, should the emperor require it. You linger in the clearing, the scent of cardamom tea still in the air, and marvel at how even in the wild, among spears, dust, and elephants, the empire tastes like home. The smoke has cleared. The hunt has moved on. And now, you follow another scent, familiar yet laced with something unexpected. It's cinnamon, but not alone. Something citrusy, something earthy, something foreign. You've arrived at a quieter wing of the palace kitchens where influence seeps into the air like steam from a spiced kettle. This is where the Mughals indulged their appetite for flavors from afar. Their breakfast, you realize, was not just a celebration of local bounty. It was a global table, centuries before globalization had a name. Here, you see Portuguese figs, Persian dried lime, Afghan saffron, and Chinese rock sugar stacked like jewels. The Mughals were imperial connoisseurs. If it tasted good and crossed a border, it found its way to the table. Start with the Persian touch. From the earliest days of the empire, Persian culinary traditions influenced Mughal taste. Babur himself longed for the polo rice of Samarkand and the Shirin drinks of his youth. Today's breakfast includes a dish called shole-e-zard, a golden rice pudding sweetened with honey, spiked with rose water, and topped with slivered almonds. It's basically the Persian cousin of the kheer you saw earlier, but finer, more delicate, and definitely more decorative. Another Persian gift? Stewed quince, served chilled, soaked in syrup, and perfumed with clove. It's tart, floral, and impossibly elegant. A fruit that demands attention and gives your taste buds a soft slap. And then there's Afghanistan, with its dried apricots, plums, and mulberries. These fruits arrived in tightly wrapped bundles on muleback, dried under mountain sun and prized for their sweetness and shelf life. Today, they're stewed slowly into a morning compote, served with crushed pistachio and a whisper of rose oil. It tastes like time travel. You shift to the spice shelf, where something sharp pricks your nose. Sumac? No, something stronger. Aha! Dried fermented garlic, likely from Central Asia. Used sparingly, it adds funk and depth to a porridge served to visiting Uzbek traders. It's acquired taste territory, but the emperor insisted on showcasing the empire's culinary fluency, like speaking 10 languages with a spoon. You move toward a workbench where two cooks are folding Portuguese-influenced sweetbread called pau. Introduced through trade in Goa, these fluffy rolls were eventually modified with jaggery and coconut, baked in clay ovens lined with banana leaves. Mughal nobility found them strange at first, then addictive. It didn't take long before a buttered roll showed up next to someone's saffron omelet. But it wasn't just ingredients, it was techniques. You watch as a cook bastes a loaf of semolina cake with spiced syrup. It's a distant cousin of Ravani, a cake from the Ottoman world, adapted here with cardamom and almond flour. Recipes traveled on the backs of camels and the tongues of servants. The empire didn't just conquer land, it adopted breakfast from it. One of the more unusual imports? Pickled olives, likely from traders returning from the Middle East. Not everyone approved. One diary entry reads, "His Majesty finds the black globes unpleasant and cold in the mouth." Still, they kept showing up on trays. Someone liked them. You linger over a pot containing what appears to be cream of wheat. But wait, the scent is lemony. The dish is halim, thickened with barley and lentils, flavored with imported dried orange peel. Its origins are Turkish, Persian, maybe even Mongol. No one agrees. Historians still argue whether halim's breakfast status was invented or inherited. Either way, it's here now, rich and rib-sticking, with a touch of citrus on the tail end. Nearby, you spy a tray of mangoes. But wait, something's off. These aren't from the local orchards. These are green-skinned Alfonso mangoes, a variety introduced by the Portuguese, later cultivated along the Konkan coast, sweeter, firmer, and beloved for export. This one's sliced in a fan pattern and served with cinnamon sugar and vinegar. Sweet, sharp, and very, very cross-cultural. A small group of kitchen staff huddle over something curious, a dish wrapped in fig leaves, bound with twine. They unwrap it to reveal spiced lentils steamed with tamarind and topped with grated cheese. Cheese? In a Mughal breakfast? Yes. Portuguese again. They brought the recipe for fresh queso fresco, which eventually became paneer, shaped by local techniques and religious taboos. Today's version tastes creamy, sour, and oddly comforting. As you watch, a small boy carries a dish of sago pearls soaked in milk and pandan syrup to the harem wing. That's an influence from Southeast Asia, likely through spice trade routes. The dish is glossy, pale green, and shimmers like a jellyfish. It's eaten with a silver spoon chilled in rose water. And perhaps most unexpected of all, a tiny cup of cocoa, dark, bitter, and whipped into a thin drink with cinnamon and jaggery. Brought by Portuguese traders, experimented with by curious cooks, and occasionally served in novelty. One emperor found it too bitter. Another thought it cured wind in the stomach. Chocolate? As medicine? Honestly, why not? This global spread isn't chaotic, it's composed. The empire's appetite is selective, curious, and strategic. It tastes what the world offers, then folds it carefully into its own identity, changing just enough to belong. You watch a taster sniff a plate of spiced orange peel cake and murmur, "Too Ottoman." It gets revised with extra saffron. Even at breakfast, the Mughals edited the world. As the trays are assembled, you realize that this is more than just indulgence. It's a culinary map, a history of trade, power, and taste all in one meal. A spoonful of rice pudding holds a Persian poem. A bread roll tells a story of coastal conquest. A cube of cheese carries with it a sea breeze and a missionary's persistence. And you float between it all, watching an empire compose itself, bite by bite, region by region, one foreign spice at a time. The palace is quieter now. The golden morning is giving way to a more subdued midday light. The musicians have wandered off. The kitchen fires have gone from roaring to smoldering. The scent in the air is gentler, less of spice, more of sweet steam and fading ghee. You move slowly now, toward what feels like an ending. This is the final chapter of our Mughal breakfast journey, the last great dawn feasts. Those tranquil, opulent, and oddly melancholy mornings in the empire's twilight. You're in Delhi now, the Red Fort. But it doesn't feel quite like the Mughal world you've come to know. The colors are still rich, the marble still gleams, but something in the air is thinner. There's an edge of hesitation beneath the polish. The empire is no longer rising, it is remembering. The emperor, let's say it's Bahadur Shah Zafar, the last of the line, sits in the hall of private audience. His breakfast tray still arrives, silk-wrapped, trimmed in silver, prepared by cooks who trained under cooks whose grandfathers served Shah Jahan. But the spirit of the meal has changed. This morning's offerings are beautiful, as always. A bowl of thickened milk with strands of saffron curling like smoke. Warm, layered parathas with honey folded in. A cup of almond sherbet, slivered papaya with black salt and mint. The flavors are familiar, soothing, but there's less. Fewer dishes, less fanfare. No music. The cooks still perform their rituals, the same hand gestures, the same measurements, the same prayers, whispered over a bowl of rice pudding. But the opulence has become almost nostalgic, like someone dressing for a ball that no longer gets thrown. One servant stirs yogurt with a silver spoon, but his thoughts drift. Another ladles curry onto rice, but the turmeric is more bitter than usual. Not because of poor technique, but because the trade routes have frayed. Some of the best saffron never arrived this season. The mangoes from Goa came late. The almonds were bruised. The empire's pantry is slowly, quietly shrinking. And the emperor? He still eats with grace. He still pauses between bites to compose couplets in his head. One, scrawled later in a letter to a friend, reads, "What remains of empire is sent on my sleeve, and breakfast dreams I cannot retrieve." Historians sometimes dismiss these final feasts as excessive, clinging to ceremony while the world changed around them. But that's unfair. The Mughal breakfast was never just about indulgence. It was about memory, about reminding oneself that beauty still mattered. That tradition, even in decline, still had taste. You glance around. The dishes still sparkle. The rose water still perfumes the air. A small dish of dried apricot stew glows amber in a beam of sunlight. The emperor's eyes rest on it a moment longer than necessary, perhaps remembering his father, or a hunt, or just a morning when everything still felt new. The servants still move with practiced grace, but they no longer whisper as much. Fewer secrets to share, fewer guests to impress. The trays are lighter, the silk napkins a bit worn, and yet the same care goes into folding them, because the empire may fade, but taste endures. There's even talk, whispered in the back halls, of new rulers in distant lands who eat standing up, who prefer coffee over tea, who've never tasted fig jam on sheermal or rice soaked in scented milk, but not yet. Today the emperor finishes his paratha. He rinses his fingers in rose water. He listens to the silence of the hall. Somewhere, a pigeon coos. A page turns. A distant clatter of hooves. He nods to the head cook, wordlessly, and the man bows deeply. It may be the last nod of approval he receives from an emperor, but he'll remember it. As will you. Because you've seen every layer of this world. The saffron dreams, the cardamom rituals, the goat cheese diplomacy, the almond milk restraint, the spiced pigeon urgency, the mango-flavored politics, and the fig-draped sadness of final mornings. The breakfast trays are lifted, the fire pits cool, and the Mughal morning, in all its silk and sugar, slowly gives way to the long, drowsy afternoon of history. And now, as the fire embers dim and the silver trays are cleared, let your breath slow. The echoes of clinking porcelain and murmured prayers begin to soften, fading into the marble corridors of memory. You've walked through quiet courtyards, scented kitchens, and velvet-draped dining halls. You've tasted the saffron in the rose, felt the heat of tan doors, the cool touch of yogurt, the softness of shirmal still warm in your hand. Let that warmth linger. Imagine now the palace still and hushed, curtains drifting in the morning breeze, a pigeon cooing lazily in a sunlit corner, the last steam of a pot curling upward into silence. The emperor resting, robe draped loosely, the weight of empire put aside, just for a moment. You are no longer floating between stoves and scrolls. You're resting, full, content. A silent guest in a vanished world where every bite was deliberate, every flavor chosen with care. And as your thoughts drift, you might feel the cool marble beneath your feet, the faint scent of rosewater on the air. A taste, sweet, spiced, nostalgic, lingering like a pleasant dream. Let it stay. Let it guide you gently into sleep. No alarms, no orders, just quiet. Because sometimes the richest empire is the one that lets you rest.